Welcome back to another lesson of the Logos and Letters. My name is Liam. Continuing with chapter 6 and quantities. The last lesson, we're looking at relatives and whatnot, and it's going to continue here. He's going to provide more examples and other things to consider. So let's get stuck straight into it. So, hostafaneron hotitauta ton prostiestin. So all this stuff above that I've left here, he just says, and thus it appears that this is, of these things that we're speaking about, it is relative. Okay, so large and small, tall and short, strong and weak. Okay, these things are relative. But let's press on. Etiante tithei tistauta posa ainai iante me tithei ugestinautois enantion uden. Right, so here is a hypothetical setup. So one might posit or suppose that these things be quantities. Okay, some might say no. They're large and small. It actually is still a quantity, right? And we say a small mountain, and then someone supposes it's not actually a relation. It's a quantity. Okay, so he's about to counter this argument, which might seem a little bit stubborn, might seem a little bit plausible that it could actually be a quantity. Let's see what happens. So he says, ugestinautois enantion uden. He's saying, none of these are contrary, right? And contrary to themselves, we have to remember, and he's going to explain that point in just a second. Hogar meestinauto kath auto lavain ala pros heteron anaferetai. So the point being made here is the first point being made here is how can quantities be a contrary to anything when they themselves are not anything like substantial, they're not anything in and of themselves, but they participate by being considered with something else. Okay, so here, okay, numbers. Is there pure number in this painting? No, but there is number by reason. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, so on and so forth. You see the point? And all the flowers too, you can do the same with all the flowers, the different colored flowers, the trees, okay? We can understand number through something else, but it's always through something else. Even when we're doing it abstractly in our mind, the abstraction's about something, okay? So there's some representation in our mind of the numbers as we calculate. Some of us might see the numbers that we're familiar with. So, for example, Arabic numerals, okay? Romans may have seen in their mind the Roman numerals, but there's always some representation of numbers. A child counting the cows might just see the cows in their head while they count. Okay, so he's saying, like, how can these things be relative, contrary things, when they don't even really exist until the mind has some representation of them or something else to consider. Especially this word here, anaferetai, referring to something else, relating to something else, right? Heteron anaferetai. Bosan fae tistutoi dienantion. So how can we say this is contrary, right? It's like a rhetorical question here. How should we say that this is a contrary? Etiti estai to megakai to mikronenantia sumbe setai to auto hammata enantia epitekestai. Right, so I'll pause it here. This is like the most convincing argument in my opinion. The one that is the most satisfactory. So here he's saying, again, eti, if if these things were, if it was a quantity, large and small and tall and short, if these things were quantities, right? And at the same time, we could have a mountain that's small compared to other mountains, large compared to other mountains, then it itself would be contrary to itself. Okay? It would be contrary to itself. So if it really were a quantity, right, this number, for some reason, is contrary to itself, which makes no sense. It would destroy itself. It can't be so, okay? Not just with mountains, but with trees as well. You might have a small tree when compared to larger trees, and a large tree when compared to smaller trees. And that supposedly quantity would then be contrary to itself, whatever number you ascribe to it. So perhaps you're measuring the weight or the age or whatever it seems to be. If you're doing an old tree and a young tree, whatever, doesn't matter. The quantity is not contrary to itself, okay? I don't know what I press there. It's not, it is, these things are relations, you know, omega, kaito, omicron, they're relations. They can have their contraries. But how can the one thing at the exact same time be contrary to itself? It's absurd. Kai auta hutois anai enantia. Sumbenai gar bote hamma toauta mega te kai micron anai. Right? And it's strange to say that this thing is big and small at the exact same time. And numbers don't have contraries, right? That's the curious rule that we learned before. It's somewhere up here that numbers don't have contraries, okay? Just like substance, right? And each substance is a unity, and a unity is one, and one is a number, and you can sort of see that relation, that thread. It's quite circular in a way, or maybe not circular, but like a helix, intertwining in that way. And so we're left with the point that no, omega, kaito, micron, indeed they are not actually quantities. They're not quantities, they're relations only. And whatever quantity happens to be in that thing that you call small or large, that isn't contrary to anything else. You can say that this small tree, okay, has the weight of, I don't know, let's just say 10 tons, right? It's 10 tons. 10 tons is not contrary to anything else, okay? But the smallness can be contrary to the largeness, right? But then again, how can that be contrary? Because then the small and largeness would exist at the exact same time in the exact same thing, right? It's just a relation only, really. It's conceptually contrary, but it's not really contrary. So 3 points to take away. Quantities don't have contraries. Second, something can be small and large at the exact same time. It just depends on what it's being related to, right? He might be the tallest man in this whole area, but he could go to another city and be just average sized. Depends on who he's been related to. We set a standard in our mind for what's large or small, and that changes with experience and more data and information. So that's point 2. Something can be large and small at the same time, depending on what it's related to. Point 3, go back here. Here's this second last one. So, hogar me est in auto, kath auto lavain, ala pros heteron anaferetai. This, it's not the case that it's large or small in comparison to itself, right? It's not contrary to itself. These things always come up when it's referred to something other, Okay, that's the third point. We don't look at every tree and go, oh, they're all small and big, right? There's logic at hand that says that everything can be small and big at the same time. Sure, but it has to be in reference to something else. Okay, so you don't look at everything and say, oh, everything is small and big. No, everything is either small because you're relating it to something larger, or everything is large because you're relating it to something smaller. That relation has to be established first. And it doesn't have anything to do with the quantity, okay? The quantity, at the end of the day, is just itself. It's left alone. It is what it is, to use that common everyday expression. And they don't admit of contraries, okay? There is a separate, distinct thing. Draw the line, separate the two. Use that mental exercise of saying, what is a relation? What is a substance? What is a quantity? All right, so untangling that web, seeing things for what they are, understanding things for what they are, and not making the mistake of almost relativism in a way, if you think about it. Because if everyone's going around saying, yep, everything's small and big and tall and short, because it can be, that's madness, right? We wouldn't be able to reliably write a narrative or a story where someone says there was a big tree on a hill, because then everyone's going, well, you know what, it's actually small too. You know, it would just be frustrating, annoying, and obviously it'd be overlooking the fact that we all have a standard for what is small or large. Okay, so we'll leave that there. There's multiple points, but there is probably a better place to finish this up. Kai auta hutois anai enantia. Right, so these things would be contrary to themselves. Sumbainai gar pote hama to auto mega te kai micron anai. Right, so sumbainai, gar pote hama, so at the same time, the thing would be large and small. Estigar prosmen tuto micron. For this thing would be small, pros heteron de auto to mega. Compared to this other thing, it would be large, right? So imagine any man or woman, relate them to a basketballer and they might be short, relate them to a child and they might be tall, or great. Hoste to auto kai mega kai micron kataton auton chronon anai sumbainai. So here he goes, and he just says that means that at the exact same time, to auton chronon, they would be, or it would be, large and small. So we can understand how that's possible, that something is theoretically large and small. It has a potential to be large and small. We've explained that. I've gone over that. It has a potential, everything, all these things, all these trees and people and whatnot, have the potential to be large and small, but only when the relation is made is it so. Okay? But notice how I said relation. Quantity just shrugs its shoulders. The quantity is always there. It has some substance that it's inhering in, or some symbol, some representation, and it just is. Okay? The quantity doesn't care if you make the relationship or not. All right? A 6'10" man is just going to be 6'10". Whether you make a relation between him and a 5'10" man, okay, the 6'10" man is just going to be that height, regardless if you then say he is tall. All right, that he is tall. That's come about by your reason. That's come about by something other. Okay, and at the end of the day, if you add that relation and you've considered that quantity, The man part is the substance, which is another further thing. Okay, so you see the parts at play there. We'll end it here. Hosta hamata enantia epitekestai. So thus, contraries can be received by the same thing. Okay, so a substance such as this man or this tree, okay, even this rock, can take up the contraries, right? Not at the exact same time, but at different times. So, for example, we don't call men tall, short men. All right, you're either tall or you're short. We don't call trees big, small trees. Okay, it's either a big tree or a small tree. It just at different times it's going to be compared to different things, and different judgments will be made of it. All right, if you listen to those people who are really into mountains, okay, you might think there's a big mountain, but some mountaineer, some expert, some diehard enthusiast, some alpine enthusiast will say, no, that's a small mountain. Trust me. And then you've got those underwater surveyors, and they look at the mountains underneath the sea, and they say, nah, trust me. Those mountains on land, they're nothing compared to the ones under the sea. So, you can see how, depending on the standard, depending on what's being referred to, things can change. So we'll leave it there. We've talked about substance, especially substance being that thing that can receive, take up the contraries, the contraries. And we've spoken about how the relation needs to be made before these words such as small and big can be used. And small and big isn't used because of the quantity. Right? The quantity is compared with another quantity. That's where the relation comes from. And quantities also, as we go back up to this first point, where is it? There was a point up here somewhere about how quantities themselves, where was it, man? That's going to bug me if I end this lesson. I bet you I'll end this lesson and I'll see it straight away. Pros heteron anaphretai, bos an faye tistuto di enantion. Never mind. I'll come back to it in the next lesson. But there was this point where he was saying, you need to focus in. You need to be very clear that the quantity isn't the relation itself. I'll find that point in the next lesson. But it was just a good reminder. So if you take anything away from this lesson, you can take away the points that we just covered, or you can think about where these things lead. Where do these things lead? Where does it lead that we're talking about separating these different things? That's great mental exercise, of course. That helps our brain grow and stay sharp. Cool, but what topics does this relate to? First of all, ethics. Okay, ethics, absolutely, especially with lifespans and things like that. That can be a conversation that really benefits from what we're talking about. But furthermore, on top of that, politics, rhetoric, all right, especially rhetoric, how you say things, how you persuade people, especially with relations and what you compare things to. It's going to be very, very useful. And if you're a biblical scholar and you're thinking, how do these words, really apply? You're going to be thinking about, obviously, any story that involves numbers at the center of it, okay? But then you're going to also be thinking of how your mind can separate these numbers from the qualities that have been spoken about. So just for one example, you might think about the story of, how the quails, they had to collect the quails, okay? God says, collect 2 quails, all right? But he doesn't say collect 2 big or small quails. He just says collect 2. So each person's going out, grabbing 2 quails. Are they grabbing big ones or small ones? Are they satisfied with that? Is everybody getting the exact same? Is everyone getting the same manna? Is everyone getting the same portion of water, okay, and all these sorts of things. You can sort of start to see anytime they mention a quantity of something, you can ask yourself, yeah, but what's the relation about? Okay, what's the did they have a large portion, a small portion, a great portion? When he says when they talk about a quantity of men, okay, it's quantity and substance. You can think to yourself, are they old? Are they young? Are they tall, short, brave, strong? Strong, weak, and all these other things. Your mind can start to ask the next question. Your mind can start to consider things that aren't explicitly mentioned, and you might think about where that leads to. All right, these are just some ideas to get you going. What I'm trying to point out is that this stuff is just foundational bedrock sort of stuff. It's cleaning up the mess, and it's trying to help us think more clearly about these sorts of things. So if that makes sense, wonderful. If you've enjoyed learning about how these things relate to one another, excellent. And if you found any of this new or uncommon, perfect. Because the point of this is that we cover all our bases before we get to the really important stuff, the controversial stuff, the useful stuff. So we'll leave that there. Thank you for listening. Si semper fortis in opere tuo. My name is Liam, and I'll see you next time.